Welcome to a new kind of truth. This podcast will broadcast a new gospel that will feel like church, where the pews are filled with the hues of the human condition. Folks searching for something because we all going through a similar kind of something, all of us looking for a message, so no need to sit in the back. Come to the front, learn a lesson, get a blessing. You probably came to be entertained or hear the choir sing, but you're about to feel the thoughts of a purpose-driven woman. No sugarcoating, all truth, straight, no chaser, here to get down to the heart of the matter, so be prepared to peel back the layers, pour your wine, open up your mind, and let's unwind to the rantings of Danny.
All right. Welcome to episode 5, I believe, in our segment, our series on racism in America. And as promised, I am here to do an interview with my mom. You guys have heard me mention the fact that I'm biracial. My parents were married in 1964, 3 years before the Loving case happened in the state of Virginia, banning, making it illegal for there to be a ban on interracial marriage. Before we get started, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, please be sure to do that. It helps me know that you're listening and lets everybody else know that we're having valid, important conversation. I do not want to have this conversation alone, so feel free to email me at danny@therantingsofdanny.com. The Facebook page is also The Rantings of Danny. You can hit me up there as well. The podcast is available on iTunes, on Spreaker, on SoundCloud, YouTube, so forth and so on. So be a part of this conversation. The idea is to open the lines of communication, to tackle the subjects and the issues that are really the pink elephants in the room, that we have to be able to come from them from a position of place, from a place of respect, of potential understanding, and at least with a little bit of empathy, in order for us to heal and grow together and create wealth of all kinds in this lifetime. So we literally want to change the world with one conversation at a time. So having said all of that, we're going to get right to the meat of the matter. And if y'all could see my mama's face right now, she actually told me today that she thought about backing out on me, but she didn't. And so she's with me, and I appreciate that. She just nodded at me. You do have to actually say something so they can hear you.
Ask me something, I'll talk.
Okay. All right. So she said when I ask her something, she'll talk. So let me go ahead and we'll start with the first question. So I guess the first thing that I would want to know is, what was it like growing up in the 50s, and where you grew up? Where did the family have racist views? Did your community have racist views? What was it like in that era, and what were some of the things that you heard or said regarding people of color?
First of all, it was BFE nowhere in Maquoketa, Iowa. There were no people of color in Maquoketa, Iowa, or Andrew, or anywhere else around. So it wasn't an issue in terms of racism. I grew up on stories of my father and his black friend when they lived in Chicago. And some of the tales that they got into, I never thought of people in terms of color being any different than I was.
Gotcha.
So it just didn't factor.
I got you. So it wasn't something, because it wasn't prevalent in your community, there was no reason to think negatively or positively. It just wasn't there. And then the stories that you did hear from your dad were actually good stories.
Yeah. I wonder how come sometimes my mom didn't leave him.
Got it. So that explains a little bit, because I think most of the time people assume that in that day and age, if you were white and you were growing up, especially in a small town where there weren't any blacks, that there would obviously be some rooted racism, but it was in fact the opposite, because there was no need for it, maybe?
It was. Maybe there probably wasn't any need for it. But I find it ironic that out of my brothers and sisters, I was the only one it really didn't touch. I had brothers and sisters when I took Big Doug home for everybody to meet. They were like, ah! And my brother to this day, he can't even speak about him without crying.
Right.
So, out of all of them, I was the one who didn't have any. And I wasn't even aware that they had any.
Right. But when you brought Daddy home, then that's when you found out some of them had it.
it was ironic because my father, when I went to the military, I got married. When I met Big Doug, when he walked in the classroom, I was like, holy cow, that one's mine. and my roommate said, oh, he's black. I said, I know. literally, that's how my mind went. And I was so determined that he was going to be mine. I went downstairs and I saw him in the phone booth. And at that time in our barracks, the phone booth, we had a co-ed thing because we were at Walter Reed. And he was in the phone booth, and the mail slot happened to be right there at the phone booth. So I ran back up the stairs and wrote my parents a 3-line letter. And then took it downstairs and stood outside around the corner until I heard him come out so I could go around and mail my letter. And then, of course, we struck up a conversation from school. So I was conniving, but I knew that was who I wanted. And truthfully speaking, I think, and I know there's going to be a lot of people say, oh, you got to bring God in. I think God set me apart from an early age because I wasn't touched like the rest of my family was.
Do you think that it's possible, because I know you were a daddy's girl.
I was.
So do you think that it's possible because you were such a daddy's girl that his stories about his black friend back in Chicago maybe impacted you or gave you a viewpoint that it didn't touch your siblings the same way because you valued your dad's opinion and who he was, so much? Do you think maybe that played a role as well?
That's kind of hard to speak to because we all grew up together. We all sat around. We all heard. One of my most prominent memories is sitting on the sofa in the living room, and they had one of the old-timey TV shows had this movie on, Playhouse something or other, and Sammy Davis Jr. was in it, and he played this soldier and whatnot, and he was kind of not well liked or whatever. Anyway, somebody threw a grenade, and he throws himself on top of the grenade to save the rest of his friends. And I'm sitting there crying, and I told everybody in the room, I said, I just love him. And my mother had 3 kinds of conniptions, and she said, he's black! And I said, I don't care. And I heard my dad laugh in the other room and whatnot. But I think that was probably the first time that I ever realized there was a difference in races.
Got it. I got it. So that was the first time is during a movie, and you realized your parents were like, "Holy crap!"
Dad was cool.
Mom was not.
Well, yeah, and I thought my father was cool until when I went to the military and I married Doug. I didn't ask anybody ahead of time or anything else. I knew that's where I was going. And when we went home, my mother had this old-timey bureau with all of our graduation pictures on it. And when I wrote to my family and told them I had gotten married, my father, who I grew up on his stories, my father went over and turned my picture down. And which I didn't know at the time. Okay? So we went home on leave. And back then, margarine had colored written on it. Margarine had to come out of the wrappers. Bread come out of the wrappers because it said white. Wasn't anything. My mother's brown towels were all put away. Nothing had anything to do with color was my father going to allow. And I think we'd been there maybe 2 days. And my dad set my picture up. It was like I was the daughter-in-law and Big Doug was the son. Yeah. And my brother, when I went home on leave, before I ever got married, when I was in the military, and I had been dating this Cuban guy, and my brother, who loved Big Doug to death, said, oh, you may as well, am I allowed to say the N-word? He said, you may as well be dating, and I said, when you see me the next time, I'll be married to one. Totally off the top of my head because I hadn't even met Big Doug at the time.
Right.
and, a lot of people don't realize that there are white niggers as well as black ones.
Yes.
So,
I get that.
But,
So I'm laughing that my white mama just said, "Am I allowed to say the N-word?" Oh my gosh, this is hilarious. Okay, so all right, so we get the fact that it seemed to skip you, even though it was rooted in the rest of the family a little bit. And so let me ask you this: how did Daddy's family respond to you?
Up jumped the devil. Outwardly, they were fine. It wasn't a deliberate, no, she can't come here. It took some. They didn't know what to do with me, and I didn't know what to do with them. To be truthful, and I was so very blessed to have a brother-in-law that was absolutely great, and he was the one interaction, so to speak, with the one sister that I had. He's the one who came to my defense.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh. But until that time, I didn't realize that there was prejudice on both sides.
Right.
So, that was a new thing. And there I was in the middle of BFE New York City and didn't know squat from anything.
Right.
I mean, my big deal with cursing was to stamp my foot on the ground.
So here's what we got. We got you growing up in BFE, Iowa. We got Daddy coming from New York. You guys meet at Walter Reed because you're both in nursing school in 1963. And you guys get married, don't ask anybody's permission, and basically take each other home. and when your dad finds out that you've gotten married without permission, without saying a word, and you're married to a black dude, your picture comes down on the mantle, just face down. And then he meets my dad, and from what I understand, because, for those of you guys who don't know, my dad died when I was 6 months old, so I have not a single memory. All I have are these stories about what an incredible person he was, and just what an amazing guy he was. And so he meets my granddad, your dad, and wins him over, and
He won the whole family over.
Won the whole family over, and then you get to New York, and their ideas, of course.
I had been to New York before I took him home.
Okay.
I met the other side first.
You met them first?
Yes.
Okay, and you didn't realize prior to that prejudice was on both sides of both families. Gotcha. Yeah. And then there you and Daddy were just kind of stuck in the middle.
We didn't care.
Got it.
Tough luck for y'all. I had a friend in California that told me, she said, Marty, she said, you and Doug are something else. And I said, what do you mean? She said, I see you all out shopping. You be at the commissary or whatever. She said, you act like you're the only two people in the world. Nobody else exists but y'all. I said, did you want recognition?
I got that. I got it. So are there times that when you think back now, because I know that you guys were shipped out, and Dad had a couple of tours in Nam, and you all were in Germany, which is where my middle brother was born. And then back here, I always say I got gypped. My oldest brother was born in freaking California. My middle brother is born in Germany, and they have my ass in like BFE, Tennessee. Like, what the heck? Like, how did that happen? I got the short end of the stick, but it's all good. So during those years and those times, can you think of a time where you felt like being in an interracial marriage was a disadvantage, or where you guys were experienced open discrimination or prejudice or anything like that? Or was it different because you guys were in the military?
I think a lot of it was different because we were in the military. But while we were in California, where I had Doug, we met a couple who had been married or together way back, way before we were. And they actually would tell stories of how they tried to tar and feather him, and I'm thinking, heck fire, if they can make it through that, I got it made in the shade.
Right.
I didn't have a problem.
Got it. So you were able to find a couple that had been, who'd already been together in an interracial marriage, way before you and Daddy ever had.
Way.
And experienced even worse things.
Yeah, they actually tried to tar and feather this man.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So, I mean, what would you say the hardest part about being in an interracial marriage was? If you had to say, okay, well, this was the most challenging part of the whole ordeal, what would it be?
The ignorance.
Yeah.
The ignorance. Because I've often maintained that black studies are needed in school as much for the white kids as it is for the black. Because I had questions and whatnot that I really, and it wasn't out of anger or trying to hurt anybody, I just didn't know.
Right.
So, to ask people like, what's wrong with you? And it was asked out of ignorance or just not understanding
Right.
the things. After I was in it, I mean, I'm the dipstick it took 5 times before I could watch The Color Purple. It tore me up. I've never understood man's inhumanity to man.
Right.
When Roots come out, we sat downstairs, and Doug was like, he had his hand in my lap, and he said, Marty, I'm the black person. What are you crying for? I don't understand why we can't all get along.
Right. I get that. Okay, so when it comes to raising biracial children, so like I remember you telling the story about Miss Shirley. That's my godmother, folks. For those of you guys who don't know, Miss Shirley teaching you how to make cookies and cream butter because you were making it using I guess like the regular mixer to blend the butter to do the butter upping. So you didn't know about. And then how was it learning that you needed to use blue magic hair grease and coconut oil? Like, what was that like? Because I mean, you can throw down, like you can cornrow some hair, you can like the whole nine. You can cornrow, you can cook some chitlins, even though I don't eat them. Like, what was that like? Learning that part of the culture.
I got that down pat from an early age. When I found out I was pregnant, we went to New York, and Doug's sister had a daughter, Niecy, had long hair. So I decided I'm going to learn how to do black hair because I may have a girl. Back then you didn't know ahead of time. You just got what you got. So I washed this little girl's hair, and it was drying faster than I could put grease on it. It was drying faster than I could plait it up. It was drying faster. And this little girl was like, and I'm thinking, oh, Jesus, please let me have a little boy. It's a different lifestyle. And if you can open yourself up, we don't have to be alike. We don't have to understand every culture there is. We just have to be open to accept it and let everyone do their thing.
Right. And be who they are and express.
Yeah. But you if you're going to be in an interracial thing, then you better get your game plan on.
Yeah, so that's one thing that I can always say that was a big deal with you was with us was, I was never going to, my hair wasn't going to be raggedy. Like it was always going to be, done and what have you. I was always going to be able to speak and be articulate and pronounce my words and enunciate and have a robust vocabulary.
Absolutely. And I'm if I'm offended by anything in this world today, other than the cadet, I am offended by people who engage in interracial reproduction. I guess that's a nice way to say it. And don't learn what it takes to take care of your children.
Right. So, like, I remember, you would see white women with biracial children, and be like, if she doesn't learn how to do that baby's head, and be upset and be offended by it, because if you are going to be in it, you got to realize what it does take, and because we don't all come out the same. I joke about being so light skinned. I tell them all the time, people don't believe I'm black until they throw my ass in a pool, and then watch this hair do what it does, because that's just part of who I am.
Look at Doug. Doug came out with great hair. Terry came out with what he called E-hair, naughty, nappy, and he can't comb me. And then you came out with that way decent. It was the luck of the draw.
Yeah, we all came out with different types of hair. definitely came out with different types of hair, and things like that. So what would you say, because by the time you had me, Dad died 6 months later, so you're 28 years old, you have 3 biracial children in itty-bitty Northeast Tennessee, a place where race definitely had touched. And so what would you say were the most challenging times about raising us here?
To be perfectly honest, and I don't know how this is going to go over, white people around here, I don't know about now because I don't even bother with people. Back then, they figure if you're black, you got a 40, you hanging out there in the street, you got this going on, you're doing the drugs. And I was bound and determined when my children walked out. I don't know what y'all did when I wasn't around. God help me. But when you were in my eyes, when we went out, you act like you had some sense. There was no cutting up in the store, screaming and hollering and carrying on. No, when you addressed someone else, you knew how to say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, and whatnot. And if you hadn't, your dad would reach back from heaven and smack you because he was really adamant about that. And my point was, and I promised him, when your dad, he said, Marty, don't let the kids grow up to just be thugs. I told him, don't worry about it. And that was my goal. No one would look at my children and assume they had no caretaking, no one to care where they went, how they looked, or whatever.
Right.
That wasn't going to happen.
So I think, there's in this community, there's always been some preconceived notions of if you're black around here, that you are somehow lacking in intelligence, lacking in drive, lacking in motivation, not about anything in this life. And, your promise to my dad was that you would raise us in such a way that no one would be able to say that about us.
That's right.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when we first moved here, to be perfectly honest about it, because I'm sure we had a Winn-Dixie out there, and we were in store grocery shopping, and I put my stuff up there, and the girl that was behind the thing was asking me because I bought Dixie Crystal Sugar.
Mm-hmm.
And she said something, and I said, excuse me, and she said it again, and I said, excuse me? And I still didn't understand her dialect, her accent, or whatever. And after the third time, I finally looked at Doug, and I said, what the hell did she say? And I'm wondering, Marty, have you dropped off the end of the world? Because we lived in New Jersey. We were used to a military background where it's a melting pot for real.
Right.
And whatnot. And a little boy in the grocery store told his mama when I had Terry in the store, and he said, you see that white woman's got a black boy with. And I looked at his mother. I said, well, suppose you look at it like this black boy has this white woman.
Right. I got it.
Turn it around. Hello?
I can remember.
But to get back to this girl, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. We were at the movies several weeks later, and we were sitting there, waiting to start. And I guess about 6 rows down, there were several white people, and this girl, who I did not recognize from the store, kept turning around looking, and kept turning around looking. And at one point, she even waved, and I'm like, what's going on with her? And finally, Doug looked at me and said, what the hell is her problem? And I said, I don't know. So we sat there a little bit, and she just kept turning around grinning. And finally, she gets up and she comes back when she gets no response from us. And she said, do you remember me from the store? I just wanted to know how you were enjoying it here. Do you like living here? And she was going out of her way to be very nice. And we were like, what the hell does she want?
Right. And that's something that we've talked about before, is this idea that sometimes, truthfully, when I come home, if we were to go right up the street and go to Golden Corral right now, people would probably stare. I would not know if they were staring because because I'm black, because I'm in gym clothes, because I'm in a ball cap. I wouldn't know. But around here, the first thing is, well, what are you looking at me like that for? because I got it all the time. You know what I mean? Growing up, and so it's something that you just never know.
And I don't pay it any attention.
Right. So, and sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. It just depends, I think. And I don't know what triggers that makes me pay attention and what triggers it when I don't. I don't know. So now, raising us here, each of us had our own unique experiences in the school system. So my middle brother, his 6th grade year, was elected Nigger of the Year in their classroom elections.
But before that, when he was in kindergarten, the bus driver, because some little boy was punching him, and he finally punched the little boy, put him off the bus a mile on the other side of the school on this busy highway where everybody traveled going to work in the morning, and would not let Doug get off to walk with him. So she puts this kindergarten kid
on the street.
Yeah, just off on this road.
So that would have been, so if he was kindergarten, so that would have been roughly 1973.
Yep. Yeah, you were a baby. Yeah.
So again, can you guys just picture this? Picture this. There's a white kid punching my 5-year-old brother on the school bus. My 5-year-old brother finally has enough, punches him back, and the school bus driver, white of course, puts my 5-year-old brother out on the side of the road, a busy highway where people are traveling back and forth. And my older brother, who's 3 years older than him, who's 8 at the time, the bus driver will not let my older brother get off with my younger brother, and they're a mile away from the elementary school.
And did not call me.
And nobody calls my mom. This is where I grew up. So, what would you say about the school system, which is funny because it's supposed to be the education system, right? So you would think that these are educated, tolerant, aware kind of folks.
Your father made an observation when we first moved here, because he loved to bowl, and he said, I don't understand. He said, because I think the black-white ratio here, we didn't have maybe 10% black in the whole area.
Mm-hmm.
And whatnot. And, of course, there was very few that actually bowled, on these. And he said, why do people act like they have to just keep standing back instead of stepping up, taking their right?
Right.
Because they didn't here. And it was an issue for him. And maybe it was colored because we did come out of the military where race wasn't in our area where we were. Race has never been an issue.
Well, on military bases, when you're in a foxhole with somebody, when you're pulling duty with somebody, you get past skin real quick. You know, and I think it's
and it's a brotherhood where everybody takes care of each other. Absolutely.
And so, you and Daddy were both in. All 3 of your children have been in. Me and both of my brothers. All of us have served, and I can remember. Do you remember this? When I went to Fort Jackson for basic, and I got my first phone call, and I said to you, I said, Mom, I know why there are no black men at home. They all live here. There's every shade, there's every size. I was like, they all live here. I was convinced that all the black men in America lived in Columbia, South Carolina at Fort Jackson.
Girl, please, when you went to visit Merle and whatnot, and I was coming to get you, it was in Fort
Bragg. I know where it was. Good Lord.
I drove on base, and my friend who went with me, she said, Mark, I said, holy cow.
I know.
I had forgotten there were black men in the world.
Because growing up here, there just aren't that many. And when I did basic at Fort Jackson, I was like, holy shit, they literally all live here. And that's the way it was when I went to Bragg, too. I was like, oh, my gosh, it was just like a melting pot. Yes. So it's definitely not something that I saw here represented on a regular basis. So now, we're kind of coming to the close. Let me ask you this, because, Terry dated white girls in high school. And I remember a particular instance where he had the Mustang, and it got shot up. Taken. You don't remember that?
I remember one of us, the mother, shooting at it. It didn't hit the car.
Are you sure?
Baby didn't have a hole in it.
Okay, maybe she missed. I thought somebody hit it the one time, but it was the mother of the girl who shot at him,
Lord, yes.
taking him back. So, what would you say most challenging thing about raising biracial children?
I don't think there should be a challenge.
I don't think that there should be, but would you say that what was the hardest part about doing it? I mean, you did it. You did it. You were one of the first people to do it.
I became darn near anti-white.
Not darn near. Darn near. Whatever, man.
Because my children were my focus. I mean, at that time, they had instances of interracial marriages where the husband died or whatever, and his side of the family wanted to take the children from the white mother because they said she's not able to teach them the proper culture. She's not able to teach them. And my stand was like, not just no, but hell no. Try it. Yeah. I was bound and determined that, I prayed. I said, Lord, and I would tell anybody, if anybody sees anything good in my children, give God the credit. Because I was just, holy cow. When someone said something, or the nigger of the year, the nasty booger on the dinner plate and whatnot, I told the school system, I will tear your roundhouse down.
I know.
I said, I will call the NAACP. They will give me a lawyer. I said, you get federal funding for every black child in this community to go to school. And I guess I was a little irate because they had the principal of the school call me, and she said, Miss Kitchens, I understand that Terry was elected the Negro of that. I said, no, ma'am. No, that's not how. When he was elected Nigger of the Year, there's a difference. There's a difference. They didn't know what to do with me.
Yeah.
At Vance, Mr. Crum told me they were taking odds. Is she white or is she high yellow? They didn't know what to do with me.
Right.
Because I drew my world around my children. I had half the kids in the neighborhood at my house.
Right.
And it was all about the kids. What everybody else did with their stupidity, they could do. Just not.
Yeah, I mean, I remember getting in trouble my third grade year when I beat up David, the white boy. He called me a faggot nigger, and split his head open on the bus. And I remember going to school the next day, and the principal asked me what would I have done if I had killed him, and I said, well, I wouldn't have cried. And he was like, well, we're going to have to call your mama. And I remember saying, let me call her for you. Like, please call my mama. Please call her. That was one thing that I don't think we ever had to worry about, that if we stood up for ourselves, if we ended up tearing somebody up because they hit us, because they called us a name, because they whatever, that was one thing that we knew was no matter what the school system said or did, you were going to have our back. So
that's it.
Yeah, so that I can say. So now let me ask you this. What do you think of the current race? She just hung her head. What do you think of the current climate of racism in America?
At one point in time, I would have said we were making strides. Not great strides. At any time have we made great strides. Mm-hmm. America's never been great in terms of, I understand racism from Native American standpoint. They were the first ones that the white superiority came in at. The blacks didn't even have a chance. They got brought here to do the job the white man was too lazy to do. So he could make $1 and whatnot. So, I don't understand the white superiority junk and stuff like that. And I think since the cadet got whatever he got, however Putin got him in there, whatever happened with their politics, I think we've taken strides backward. And maybe it's just that they're bolder, to come out and say things than they have been before.
Do you think that they're bolder, or do you think that we're just more connected now to where we hear it and say it? Because I think, if you go back to the 40s and the 50s, they were pretty bold back then. They were bold It's just, I just don't know that we saw it the way that, it's a different climate. I agree. I also think, and this is just my personal opinion, I think that after the civil rights era, it became unpopular and socially unacceptable to be openly racist. So people had to hold their opinions to themselves or for backdoor conversations.
Well, more people were willing to stand and say, it's just another person.
Right.
There were people that did that. But on the other hand, I think a lot of it is, you remember when Jody came to visit that time, and Terry and him went out on the front porch because I was in the yard, and Reese came out of the door across the street, and Terry said, "Yo, nigga, what's up?"
Yeah.
And Reese said, "Not much." Jody said, "Yo, nigga, what's up?" And Reese stopped on a dime. But Jody didn't know.
Let me give y'all a little bit of background. Jody is my white cousin, and so he'd come down from Missouri to spend some time here, and so he's with my brother, who of course is biracial, and they're on my front porch, and the neighbor comes out from across the street, and my brother is like, "What's up, nigga?" And my neighbor immediately responds back, "Nothing much, what's up?" And my white cousin follows suit, "What's up, nigga?" Because he didn't know that was not quite what he should be saying. And my neighbor stopped like immediately, which is, and I think that's the thing. So here's what I think is important. So if that had been a random situation, right, the neighbor's response probably would have been something different. But because my brother was there as the connection between the two, there was an opportunity for understanding. There was an opportunity for grace, and there was an opportunity for education on all sides to say, hey, you might not want to do that.
A lot of that comes from understanding the different cultures. Where Terry could get away with saying it, Jody couldn't.
Right.
Not that Jody meant any harm.
He didn't. Right.
He was just the wrong skin color.
And this is the thing, though. Had it not been that those folks knew each other on a personal level, we would have missed the opportunity to be able to share that and explain that. And that's what I think, it makes a big difference, is the ability to see each other on a personal level, on a human level, and get past the superficial stuff.
Yes, but I think that word, I think the connotations of the word, because people of color use the word, like I would say, "Yo, what's up?" or what, people of color use that word. And when people who have no racism at all, don't, to them, or who don't know, they don't know that it could be offensive to them, they use the word. So,
right. Conversation and intent has a lot to do with it. Okay, so in closing, we'll wrap this up. So in closing, she said, "Thank God." In closing, what, if anything, what advice or what word would you give us in the climate that we're in now? Any words of wisdom that you might have on the subject whatsoever? And of course, that's her phone going off. Because
I think one of the most important things is to take the time to see beyond the skin color. I'm sure everybody out there has met someone of color different than their own. And once they got to know them, P is an example.
Right.
When I first met her and whatnot, she was talking one day about one of her friends getting robbed or something. But she said, if I were ever going to get robbed, I wouldn't want it to be a black person. It would have to be a white person or whatever. And after they left and whatnot, and Doug and I were talking, and I said, "Can I ask you something?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "What possible difference does the skin color make? I don't want to be robbed by any color."
Right.
Because, but over the years, she has been my closest friend around here. And I'm sure there's probably times she's wanted to shake her head and say, "Marty, what rock did you come out from under?" And because of where I came from, race has never been an important thing for me until it came to my children and the stupid stuff that people do now. But when somebody asks something that's offensive or whatever, maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they don't really mean anything harmful by it.
Right.
Another question or two, and you'll know where they're coming from. But that initial one may just be asked out of ignorance.
Right. And I think asking questions is the only way that we gain the knowledge and the understanding. And once we do that, at a bare minimum, we can just agree to disagree. You know what I mean? At the bare minimum, but maybe develop some understanding and some empathy along the way.
It wasn't until you came back from Standing Rock and you told me some of the things that they said, that people ask them and they're offended by it. And I'm like, really? Because it was a question I would have asked, but it would have been asked just because I was interested.
Well, and I think for them, it was different because they had never had that variety of people on their land before. So it was overwhelming. And so they promised to, be mindful of that at the same time. And they just asked for consideration on both sides. So I appreciate you for spending time and giving us your perspective and your experience. You guys, like I said, I want to continue this conversation, and we've got one more episode on racism in America, and then we are going to be diving into religion in America as well. And she chuckles at that fact. You raised me, so I appreciate you all for being part of this conversation. And again, you can email me at Danny@therantingsofdanny.com. The Facebook page is The Rantings of Danny. Subscribe to the podcast, download it, tell your friends about it. Let's change the world one conversation at a time. You guys be amazing, be light, be love, and I am out.